Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I'll never forget the sound of the front door opening that night. Midnight. The house was dark except for the faint glow of the streetlight cutting through the blinds. She stepped in like she owned the silence, heels clicking on the hardwood. And then she said it, almost laughing. "Why aren't you sleeping? I already got the attention I needed." That was the moment everything inside me stopped moving. My heart didn't pound. My hands didn't shake. I just looked at her, standing there with her hair messy from the night. Perfume clinging to her clothes like it belonged to someone else's world, not mine. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask questions. I didn't demand an explanation. I had already prepared for this moment without realizing it. So I told her, calm as stone, "I packed your things. Take them and head back." She froze. Not because she felt guilt, but because she hadn't expected me to react this way. She thought I'd argue, maybe beg, maybe break. But instead I stood there like I'd already lived this scene 100 times in my head. And maybe I had. The silence stretched between us, heavy, like the whole house was holding its breath. She tried to smile it off, like I was bluffing, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted toward the hallway, toward the bedroom she no longer had a claim to. She didn't know yet that I had stripped it bare of every trace of her. Her makeup bag, her folded dresses, even the framed photos that once sat on the dresser. All of it was boxed, stacked neatly by the garage door. I didn't follow her when she walked down the hall. I just listened. The sound of boxes shifting. The quick rustle of clothes shoved back into bags. A zipper pulled too hard. She was unraveling, not because she lost me, but because she lost control. And as I stood there, leaning against the kitchen counter, I thought back to the small signs. The late nights she explained away with vague excuses. The sudden obsession with her phone, screen tilted away, her smile meant for someone else. I had seen it. I just hadn't said it out loud. Not until tonight. When she reappeared, dragging her suitcase, she tried one last look at me. Not pleading, calculating. Waiting for me to flinch, to soften, to invite her back in. But I gave her nothing. She had already said the line that ended everything. I already got the attention I needed. So I stayed silent. And in that silence, she realized something terrifying. She hadn't broken me. She'd only set me free. The morning after she left, the house was still. I brewed 1 cup of coffee, not 2. The table where we used to sit felt wider than it ever had. The silence sharper than any argument. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. But I knew it was coming. She wasn't the type to disappear quietly. By noon, the knock came. Light at first, then harder. I opened the door and there she was, dressed in yesterday's clothes. Eyes a little red, hair pulled back like she'd rushed. She tried to smile, tried to soften her voice. She said she only wanted to talk. But her eyes gave her away. They were scanning the house behind me, checking if the boxes were still there, if I'd really meant what I said. I didn't invite her in. I leaned against the doorframe and let her speak. She started with excuses, traffic, stress, misunderstandings. Then she pivoted to nostalgia, mentioning the trips we used to take, the little things she claimed to miss. I stood there, arms crossed, letting her drown in her own words. She waited for me to interrupt, to argue, to show some sign that I was still hooked. But I didn't. I had already made my move. Earlier that morning, I'd logged into our shared accounts. I rerouted my salary to a new one she didn't know about. I froze the credit card she used for her late-night shopping. The financial lifeline she depended on was gone. When she realized I wasn't answering, she grew restless. She asked if she could come inside. I shook my head once. Her face cracked for the first time, a tiny fracture in the mask she always wore. She shifted her weight, tried a softer tone. She said she missed me, but I could hear it. Her voice was thin, more desperation than affection. I finally spoke, calm and steady. I told her there was nothing to discuss. I had already packed her things. I had already made my decision. She blinked, as if the words didn't compute, as if she'd misheard me. Then she said something quiet, almost a whisper. People make mistakes. But I didn't answer. I closed the door. Slowly. No slam, no drama. Just silence. Inside, I sat back down with my coffee, scrolling through my phone like it was just another morning. Because for me it was. For her, it was the beginning of the unraveling. She had stepped out thinking she could test my limits. What she didn't know was that my limits had already been replaced with walls. And now, For the first time in years, I wasn't the one waiting. By the third day, the silence started working on her. I could feel it, even without seeing her. That's the thing about distance. It speaks louder than any confrontation. And sure enough, it didn't take long before the calls began. Not from her, but from people around her. Her sister rang me first. She said she was worried, said my wife was upset, and just needed a chance to explain. I listened, polite, giving nothing away. Then I told her calmly that everything had already been explained. The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing, like she wanted to ask more, but she didn't. She hung up. That evening, my phone buzzed again. A mutual friend. He said she told him I had overreacted, that she'd just been out with colleagues, nothing serious. I let him talk. Then I asked one question. Did she tell you what she said when she walked in at midnight? There was silence on his end, then a slow exhale. He said no. I said that's because the truth wasn't meant to be shared. And I ended the call. The next day, her mother reached out. Her voice was tight, defensive, almost rehearsed. She said marriage was about forgiveness. She said I shouldn't throw everything away over one mistake. I thanked her for her opinion. Then I reminded her that her daughter had already announced she'd gotten the attention she needed, just not from me. There was a pause, then the kind of silence that tells you someone finally understood. Meanwhile, I didn't slow down. I spent more time at the gym, longer hours at work, even stopped going straight home afterward. My evenings belonged to me now. And it wasn't about distraction. It was about reclaiming the space she'd taken for granted. One night, I ran into a colleague at a bar. She asked where my wife was, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I told her things had changed, and I left it at that. Her eyes lingered, curious, but I didn't offer details. I didn't need to. The shift was obvious. I wasn't carrying dead weight anymore. Later that week, my wife tried a different approach. She left a message on my voicemail. Her voice was shaky, softer than I'd heard in months. She said she just wanted to talk face to face, that shutting her out wasn't fair. I listened once, then deleted it. Because fairness had nothing to do with this anymore. It wasn't about balancing accounts or trading apologies. It was about precision. And every day of silence was cutting her deeper than any argument ever could. I didn't set out to find anything. I was only looking for a charger one night, digging through the drawer in the hallway where she used to keep her things. That's when I saw it. Her old phone, the one she claimed had stopped working months ago. I don't know why I turned it on, maybe just instinct, maybe curiosity. But it lit up, battery still holding enough life to wake the screen. And there it was. A string of messages. Not to me. Not even close. I scrolled once, twice, and that was all I needed. Words no husband should ever have to read. Promises, jokes, inside references that didn't belong to our marriage. I didn't feel rage. Not even heartbreak. Just a cold kind of clarity, like reading the weather forecast for a storm that already passed. It wasn't news. It was confirmation. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. No confrontation, no accusations. I didn't even mention it to anyone. Because what good would that do? She already knew what she had done. And now I knew too. The silence between us had just gained another layer, one she couldn't erase with excuses. The next day, she tried again to reach me. She sent a message asking if we could at least sit down and have dinner, her treat. I didn't reply. Hours later, another text came. She said she was sorry if she had hurt me. Sorry if. That was all I needed to see. She still thought this was a negotiation, like there was room for her words to shift the outcome. I closed the phone, slipped it into my pocket, and went back to lifting weights at the gym. Every rep felt cleaner, sharper, as if each one was carving away the last remnants of the life I had with her. When I walked out, I didn't even check for another message. By then, her words meant nothing. That night, I cooked for myself. A simple meal, one plate, one glass, one fork. The table looked different, stripped down to essentials. I sat there, calm, almost peaceful. Somewhere across town, she was probably pacing, wondering why her apologies were bouncing off me like stones hitting steel. But that was the point. I wasn't going to give her the gift of my anger. I wasn't going to let her feel powerful for drawing a reaction. Instead, I left her alone with her own reflection. And that silence, the silence of a man who knew the truth but no longer cared, was louder than any fight could ever be. The invitation came from mutual friends. A casual gathering, nothing dramatic, just drinks, food, the usual weekend chatter. I almost didn't go. But something in me wanted to see how she'd act outside the safety of her excuses. So I showed up. Alone. When I walked in, the room shifted. People noticed. I wasn't the man dragging his wife along, smiling to keep the peace. I was different now. Calm, collected, untouchable. And she saw it the moment our eyes met. She was already there, sitting too close to a glass of wine, pretending to laugh at something she clearly hadn't heard. For the first hour, I kept to myself. Conversations flowed, jokes were shared, and I stayed measured. I didn't bring her up, didn't acknowledge her presence beyond a nod. And that silence? It worked like a scalpel. She couldn't take it. She started circling closer. First by joining a group I was talking to, then by dropping little remarks loud enough for me to hear. She mentioned how difficult marriage could be, how some people didn't know how to forgive. It was vague, but everyone understood. I didn't bite. I kept my tone even, talking about work projects, gym routines, small plans for the future. Every word I spoke without her in it cut deeper than if I had shouted her betrayal from the rooftop. At one point, a friend asked if we were doing okay. I smiled, steady, and said things had changed. That was all. Short, clean, unshakable. She tried to laugh, to twist the moment, but her voice cracked. She was unraveling right there in front of everyone. By the end of the night, her mask had slipped completely. She cornered me by the door, voice sharp, demanding to know why I was acting like she didn't exist. I looked at her once, then past her, and said nothing. Just walked out. Later, I heard from one of the friends that she had broken down after I left. Tears, rambling words, excuses spilling faster than anyone could follow. But none of it mattered, because she hadn't lost me that night. She had lost the image she worked so hard to project. And the most devastating part for her was realizing she couldn't control the story anymore. I had taken it back, not with arguments, but with silence. And now, everyone else could see the cracks she thought she had hidden. After that night with our friends, something inside me clicked. I realized I didn't need to keep circling the same places, seeing the same faces, replaying the same routines that had quietly caged me for years. So I started changing. I joined a different gym across town. New equipment, new faces, no memories tied to her. I stayed longer after work, talking to colleagues I'd never really noticed before. A few of them invited me out for drinks, and for the first time in years, I said yes. It wasn't about chasing attention. It was about reclaiming pieces of myself I had shelved. I bought new clothes. Nothing flashy, just sharp, clean, intentional. I cut my hair shorter, even changed the way I carried myself. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't seen in years. A man who wasn't defined by someone else's moods. A man who wasn't orbiting around another person's approval. She noticed. Of course she did. One afternoon, she showed up at my office. I didn't expect her, but she stood there in the lobby, waiting. She tried to sound casual, asking why I hadn't returned her calls. She said I looked different. She even laughed nervously, asking if I was seeing someone new. I kept my answer short. I told her I was busy, nothing more. And the look on her face told me everything. She realized, maybe for the first time, that I wasn't pretending. I wasn't trying to punish her. I wasn't trying to lure her back. I was simply done. That weekend, I went hiking with an old college buddy I hadn't seen in years. The trail was rough, the air sharp, but it felt alive. At the top, looking out over the valley, I realized how much space there was in my life now. Space she once filled with distance and silence. But without her, that space wasn't empty. It was free. Meanwhile, she started circling harder. More messages. More sudden attempts to bump into me. I heard from a mutual friend that she was asking about me constantly, spinning stories about how I was going through a phase. But the truth was simpler. I was becoming untouchable. And the cruelest part for her? I wasn't doing any of it for revenge. I wasn't building a new life to spite her. I was building it because she no longer had a place in mine. That was the difference. And she finally saw it. When silence and distance didn't bring me back, she shifted tactics. She started circling through the things she thought still tied us together. Money, bills, the quiet logistics of a shared life. She assumed I was still carrying the weight, still paying for the conveniences she took for granted. She assumed wrong. It began with a message about the credit card. She said it wasn't working, that the payment must have glitched. I didn't reply. Hours later, another message came, sharper this time, asking if I had forgotten to pay. I didn't answer that one either. By the end of the week, she called, her voice strained, demanding to know what happened. I told her calmly that I had separated everything. She would need to handle her own expenses from now on. There was silence on the other end. Then the click of her hanging up. The next day, I got an email about the utilities. Her name wasn't on them, only mine. She wrote that she couldn't log in to see the account, that she needed access. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I called the provider, updated everything, and split the services under my name alone. When she realized, she tried again, this time showing up at my door, papers in hand. She said it wasn't fair, that I couldn't just erase her from what we'd built together. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I told her she had already erased herself the night she admitted she got the attention she needed elsewhere. I had only followed through. Her lips parted like she wanted to scream, but no sound came. She turned, stormed off, but the weight of the moment clung to her shoulders. Meanwhile, I felt lighter. The house didn't feel like ours anymore. It was mine. Every corner carried only what I allowed. I even moved furniture, changed the layout, stripped away the last traces of her taste. It was more than redecorating. It was reclaiming space she thought she could haunt. Friends noticed the change in me. They said I seemed sharper, clearer. One of them joked that I looked younger, like I had dropped 10 years in a month. And maybe I had, not in age, but in weight. She, on the other hand, was unraveling. Word reached me that she had borrowed money from her sister, that she had started venting to friends about how cold I had become. What she didn't admit was that I hadn't become cold. I had simply stopped being her safety net. And the moment she realized those last threads were gone was the moment she finally understood I wasn't coming back. It was late on a Friday when she showed up again. I hadn't invited her, hadn't spoken to her in weeks, but there she was at my door. She wasn't dressed like someone stopping by to talk. Her hair was curled, makeup perfect, perfume heavy enough to announce itself before she even spoke. She tried to smile, tried to look soft, almost shy. She said she just wanted a moment, just wanted to come in and talk. I stepped aside, not out of weakness, but because I wanted her to see how little it mattered. She walked through the door like she was reclaiming old territory, scanning the rooms that no longer belonged to her. The house was different now, rearranged, stripped of her presence, rebuilt in my image. She noticed. Her face flickered when she realized she was a guest in a place that once carried her name. She sat down on the couch, crossing her legs slowly, deliberately, like it was still a game. She asked if I remembered the first time we'd bought that furniture, how we'd argued over colors. She laughed like the memory was warm. I didn't respond. I stayed standing, arms folded, letting her talk. Minutes passed before she shifted. She leaned back, pulled at the neckline of her blouse, and let her voice drop softer. She said we could work things out, that she missed the way things used to be. She touched my arm when I walked past her, her hand lingering. But I didn't flinch. I didn't lean in. I didn't return the touch. I simply moved her hand away and kept walking. Her eyes widened, not in anger, but in shock. She wasn't used to this silence, this absence of reaction. For years, she had wielded control through withholding, through making me chase what she dangled. Now, she was the one reaching and finding nothing. She tried one last time, her voice breaking. She said she knew she had made mistakes, but she still loved me. I looked at her, calm, steady, and said nothing. No argument, no forgiveness, no negotiation. Just silence. Then I opened the door. She hesitated, staring at me like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. Then she picked up her purse and walked out. No dramatic exit, no final words. Just the soft click of heels fading into the night. And as the door shut, I realized something. She hadn't come back because of love. She'd come back because she finally felt the weight of being irrelevant. And nothing cuts deeper than realizing you're no longer needed where you once held all the power. When silence and distance failed, and seduction fell flat, she turned to the last weapon she thought she had, other people's ears. It started small, whispers through mutual friends. They told me she'd been saying I had become cold, unrecognizable, that I was shutting her out without reason. She framed herself as the abandoned one, the victim of a man who had suddenly changed. I didn't fight it. I let her talk. Because words are fragile when they aren't backed by truth, and the more she spoke, the more the cracks showed. At a gathering one weekend, I walked in to find the air already heavy. Eyes glanced my way, cautious, as if half the room had been fed the same story. She was there too, sitting at the edge of the group, wine in hand, her face carefully painted with sadness. She tried to steer the conversation, mentioning how difficult things had been, how she just wished I would open up. A few heads turned toward me, expecting a response. I didn't give one. I only smiled politely, said I was doing fine, and changed the subject. That silence cut sharper than any defense. It left her story hanging in the air, unconfirmed, unsupported. People noticed. Later that night, one of the friends pulled me aside. He said something didn't add up. He'd heard her version, but after watching us in the same room, he could see the truth didn't fit. He said I looked steady, grounded. She looked restless, like someone trying to keep control of a narrative slipping through her fingers. And that was the shift. The very people she tried to use as her shield began to see through her. The more she pushed, the more desperate she looked. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to explain. Her words were building her downfall faster than I ever could. I heard later that one of her closest friends finally confronted her, asking directly what she meant the night. She said she already got the attention she needed. She denied it at first, but the crack was too wide. They pressed again, and she stumbled. That was the moment the story she built collapsed, and the truth leaked out in front of the same circle she had tried to control. I stayed silent through all of it. I didn't correct anyone, didn't spread a single word, because I didn't have to. She had created her own cage, and the walls were closing in without me lifting a finger. And that's when I knew her power over me wasn't just gone. Her power over anyone was slipping too. The last attempt came on a Sunday evening. I was sitting on the back patio, the sun dropping low, the air cool, when I heard the knock. I knew it was her before I opened the door. She stood there without makeup this time, hair tied back, eyes swollen like she hadn't slept. She said she just wanted 5 minutes. I let her speak, standing in the doorway, not inviting her in. She started softly, reminding me of memories she thought still carried weight. Vacations, late nights, promises we once made. Her voice cracked as she said she missed the way I used to look at her. She said she realized now what she had lost. I didn't answer. My silence pressed against her words until they sounded smaller, weaker. She shifted, desperation creeping in. She asked if there was someone else. She asked if I had truly erased her from my life. Finally, she asked if I hated her. I shook my head once. Not in anger, not in forgiveness, just clarity. I told her hate required energy, and she no longer had that power over me. Her face collapsed at those words. She had come hoping for fire, for anger, for proof that she still mattered in some way. Instead, she found emptiness. I handed her a plain envelope. Inside were the papers I had prepared weeks ago. Everything finalized, everything clean. I told her all that was left was her signature. She held it like it burned, staring at the lines she thought she'd never see. For the first time, she seemed truly small. She tried one last plea, her voice barely above a whisper. She said people make mistakes, that we could rebuild. I stepped back, opened the door wider, not to let her in, but to show her the way out. No shouting, no accusations, no dramatic ending. Just silence. She walked away slowly, glancing back once as if waiting for me to call her name. I didn't. The sound of her car starting, then fading down the street, was the last trace of her in my life. I sat back on the patio, finished my drink, and felt the weight lift. For the first time in years, the air around me was still, clear. No tension, no second-guessing, no half-love clinging to the edges of my days. She had gambled on my weakness. She had counted on my forgiveness. What she never saw was the man who could walk away without a word. And now she'll spend the rest of her life remembering the silence I left behind. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.